here's what I wanted to cover, and you have to forgive me. I'm going to pull into my bag of tricks and do something that I haven't done for a while in terms of materials and course material, but I think it's necessary because y'all are being extremely successful, and some of you have closings on the books. So I want to make sure that we are covering the closing process, and I've got a class basically titled "Preparing for the Closing." All right. So we are going to start going through and kind of looking at the flow of things. And to that end, I want to at least cover one thing. I found this recently, and I have the best of intentions of expanding upon this little flow chart that I'm about to show you. But this is kind of a typical real estate transaction. This one particular that I'm going to show you is on the buy side, but it kind of helps you see the flow of everything from the contract to the close, which to be honest with you folks, the closing, the easiest part of our jobs as real estate agents, and I tell my clients this all the time, the easiest part of our job is driving around looking at pretty houses and figuring out which one you want. Okay, that is by far the easiest part of what we do. What is hard and what is difficult about our jobs, and frankly, why we make the money that we do off of every single transaction, comes into play after you found the right home for your client, and between the time that you get your offer accepted and the time that you close. Okay, and there can be about a million different diversions to the flow chart that I'm about to show you, but this is a good place to start. All right, everybody with me so far? All right, y'all looking at my screensaver? Here's what I wanted to show y'all. Okay, everybody see this okay? So this is your typical real estate transaction from contract to close. There are some additional steps, in my opinion, that are required in here. Things that we don't see, and what I wanted to insert here is things like you sending the contract to the help desk and getting your broker's coordination on this and things like that. But this is actually a good big picture. So these are the steps of getting the offer accepted, getting your determining your real estate needs for your buyer, application for the loan and the pre-approval process, viewing the properties, creating the offer to purchase, negotiating and doing counter offers, and getting the offer accepted. This part, I think, for the vast majority of us, we probably have got this under control. It's what happens in these steps down here that may be of question mark to many of us. Okay. So here are the 3 steps, and if you see this, buyer agent coordinates, buyer agent oversees and lender coordinates, and then buyer agent oversees and the title company coordinates. So you are in the center and you are involved in all 3 of these processes, but the buyer agent coordinates the property inspections. Doesn't mean that you're the one that's actually scheduling the inspection. You're providing information and referrals. You're determining the deficiencies and negotiating those repairs, either being made or negotiated. Trick question: would you rather have the seller be doing the repairs or negotiating terms separate from and not having your buyer do those repairs? Trick question.
Negotiate and have the buyer take care of it.
Good point. Why would you not want to have the seller doing repairs to a home that they're not going to live in for the next 30 years?
Because they don't care and they just trying to spend the lease and get this over with.
Good statement. Absolutely true. Unfortunately, you kind of have to go through the exercise of identifying what the problems are and highlighting those problems to the seller in order to earn the pass of saying, okay, We acknowledge the fact that there's problems with plumbing, there's problems with this roof, there's problems with the gas hot water heater not having an expansion tank. We think that those are around $2,000 worth of issues, and we would like to have that contributed towards closing costs. Okay, some of those things it's an exercise you got to go through, and then secure homeowners insurance. To a certain extent, you're involved in that process, but not really. Okay. Then the buyer's agent is going to oversee and coordinate while the lender is doing their part of getting the formal application made. The final credit reporting and the appraisal ordered, verification of income and assets. These people, this is happening in the background, and you're just kind of facilitating that. And then the buyer's agent is overseeing, and the title company is doing the title commitment ordered, and the title search is being performed, and the title basically the clear title is being received, and then that gets assembled into a loan package, which gets a final submission to underwriter or to the loan committee, and then you're looking for loan approval, also called clear to close. Okay, everybody's heard the term clear to close and loves that term. All right, and this is typically happening in an ideal world. You're seeing this happening a week to no less than 3 days prior to the closing date. Okay, we all clear so far? And why 3 days? What has to happen on the third day prior to closing? Tracy, do you know? Okay, so everybody knows from RESPA that the buyer has to look at the closing disclosure no less than 3 days prior to the closing, because they have to have the ability to review it, sign off on it, and make sure that they have the funds necessary to close. And by law, that all has to happen, according to RESPA, no less than 3 days prior to closing. Okay, so they have to have at least 3 days to review this, and they can change their mind at that point. Okay. All right, all of that is happening, and then the loan documents will go to the title company, title company, i.e. title company or closing attorney. They're, in most cases, these two steps are happening in concert in the state of Georgia. And then you're attending the closing. While you're at the closing, you're managing the funds are being managed, the new deed and the mortgage are recorded, and the seller is paid, and then the home becomes the legal possession of your client. Seems simple, right? But as many of you may have already experienced, there are a lot of potential roadblocks, a lot of potential conflicts that happen in these simple steps, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more about in more detail today. Okay, does that big picture help people kind of understand where the flow goes and how that process works? Okay. Any questions before I launch into something else? All right. Y'all are talkative. It must be a Monday morning. All right. So here is what we're going to talk about today in more detail. Okay, y'all looking at a PowerPoint preparing for the closing? Okay. Okay, preparing for the closing, everybody. So the first thing is we're going to talk about what's going to happen the week prior to the closing, and then the day prior to the closing, Talking a little bit about setting expectations. We're going to talk about reading the Alta or the closing disclosure, and then the actual activities that you're going to be engaging in at the closing and then after the closing. So we're going to look at this in a clear timeline point of view. Okay, so approximately 1 week prior to the closing, you are going to want to be doing things like verifying any repairs that might have been negotiated. Hopefully they have not been negotiated, but anything that has been negotiated has been completed. So hopefully when you've done your amendment to address concerns, or potentially the appraisal might have required some subject to repairs to be completed, you want to use those documents as kind of the checklist. And hopefully in those you have specified that if the seller is to do repairs, that they are to provide a copy of any receipts from the plumber or roofing company or whatever you've requested to be done, that you have required them to provide you some receipts to show that a professional has completed their work. So if you've not been provided that organically from your co-op agent, you need to request that those be sent to you. So that was what we're talking about here. So requesting from your co-op agent, hey, can you send, haven't seen the receipts yet from the plumber for, you know, the plumbing work that was to be done on the hot water heater. Can you go ahead and send those over? Okay. The week prior to closing, you want to confirm the date and time of the closing appointment and let all the parties know. Most of the closing attorneys will actually provide you a little map with directions for you to provide to your client. Contact the lender, and you're going to want to check the status of the loan. And hopefully at this point you have gotten the verified clear to close has been issued, in which case you want to make sure that the closing disclosure, the CD or the Alta, has been signed, sent off to your client, and that they have acknowledged receiving it. And of course, you're going to want to communicate with your client, hey, we're just waiting on the clear to close at this point, and to be watching for the email from the lender. Okay. Something that is typically happening in the background, and usually by the help desk, i.e. Christina or Nicole, the utility provider's information sheet from the seller and forward it to the buyer. And then you might want to counsel your client that they are responsible for setting up their services effective on the closing date. Or if you are representing the seller, contractually, when are they obligated to keep the utilities on through? That's a question.
Is it until the end of due diligence?
No, contractually, they're supposed to have the utilities remain on through the closing date. Okay. So that's why you want to counsel your client if they don't want to show up on the day after the closing and find that there's no electricity in the house and that it's August and it's 112 degrees inside the house. They might want to make sure that they've gone to have the utilities set up and have those turned on. Okay. So contractually, the client is responsible for making sure that that the seller has the utilities on through the closing date. Okay. Okay. They're also going to verify the closing disclosure has been sent. This is, I launched into this a little bit early, that your buyer has received and signed it, and the buyer client has done all this no later than 3 days prior to the closing. All right. Something that Karen is typically involved in within our brokerage is verifying that the closing attorney has a copy of all the amendments and all the contract documents, as well as the instructions to the closing attorney. You will often synonymous to instructions to the closing attorney, which is an official GAR document title. That's also generically called the commission confirmation agreement. And that is the document that says what your commission split is, what the seller's agent commission split is, and what the brokers are saying, and if any of either the buyer or the seller are responsible for any portion of your commission, that's going to be in that document also. Okay. Any questions on that? Has everybody seen that document? Do you know what you're looking at with this one? Okay. I don't think I've ever done a class on the instructions to the closing attorney. It would take all of 10 minutes to do, but maybe that's something we could do in the near future. Okay, verify that the closing attorney has the loan package from the lender. This is the lender sending everything to the closing attorney, which is usually necessary for them to do their final processing. Sometimes this is taking place 3, 4, 5 days prior. Sometimes it might be the morning of. It all depends on the lender. It can be a little crazy. All right. Also, the week prior to the closing, you're going to want to understand who is going to be present at the closing. Are both parties going to be there? Is one of them one side of the transaction going to be doing a mail away? Is that going to be required? If so, there's some additional coordinations that might be necessary. Also, the possibility of a power of attorney being used in the transaction will also help you determine, you know, who's going to be there, and you might want to prepare your client for the fact that they might be sitting across the table from no one. Okay. And then also, the week prior to the closing, got to start thinking about that closing gift, y'all. All right. And again, within our brokerage, you've got the resources of the help desk to help you with that. Does anybody value the help desk and our little sign ordering process? You know which signs I'm talking about. As much as I do, I think that is the perfect closing gift, and it's an easy thing, and it's relatively cost effective. I love that about our brokerage. Hopefully you guys feel the same. All right, so preparing for the closing, you want to set the expectations with your client. Okay, they've never done a closing before. You've probably done several, and hopefully you're doing 8, 10, 15, 20 per year. So it's not something that is familiar with you, but it is unfamiliar to you. But you have to realize your client has no idea what to expect. So you need to give them what those expectations are. Okay, you're your client's guide to this process. So you want to make sure that they feel comfortable with what's going to happen. Okay, so make sure that they're looking out for that CD to sign and to return it to the lender as soon as possible. You want to talk to them about the final walk, what the purpose of the final walk is, and what that process looks like. And then you want to schedule it either the day of or the day prior to that closing. Okay, so trick question, what is the purpose of the final walk?
To make sure that all the stuff has been taken care of and the house is in the same condition as the day they last saw it, I guess. And
okay.
Everything is okay. Because when they get their keys, there's no return policy. So they need to make sure everything is addressed.
Absolutely spot on. You are absolutely correct. This is an extreme case. And I'll tell you about this little horror story so that you can file this away in your memory banks and make sure that you don't become one of these scenarios. I have a very dear friend of mine that was navigating through, and the morning of the closing, he sends a picture, which is a selfie of him doing this, and in the background is a pile of ashes where a home once stood. And this was his listing that caught fire the day before the closing. Okay. And he had very intelligently done the final walk and discovered that this had all taken place. And guess what? If he had not done that and gone to the closing table and they signed documents, theoretically, in the worst case scenario, that buyer would have been buying that pile of ashes. Okay. So that is why you do a final walk. You do not delegate this. You do not abstain from this. You always do that final walk to verify that the home is still there, that when they were moving out, they didn't break a pipe and forget to turn the heat on, and a pipe froze and the water's got 3 feet, the basement has 3 feet of water in it. These are things that we as real estate agents have to think about the worst case scenario and put processes in place to prevent that from ever happening.
Good question. So you do
Yep.
that final walk with your buyer, right? You don't just do it on your own.
Oh, absolutely. You do it with your client.
Okay.
Yep. And we're going to talk more of the details about how that process looks in just a second.
Okay.
Okay, hang on just a second. Let me get back to here. Oh, this is what I was looking for. Hang on, folks. Trying to figure out which screen to do this to. Share again. All right, now what are you looking at? Are we back? Okay, so there we were, scheduled either the day of or the day prior. You don't do this 3 days prior, because remember that pile of ashes story right there. Do it the day of or the day before. And sometimes if you do it the day before, I would even say do a drive-by the day of, that morning of. If you're not going to be closing until that afternoon, you might just want to, either you or your client, just do a drive-by to make sure it's still standing that morning. Okay. All right. Explain to your client, this is again part of setting the expectations with them, that there may be a slight difference between the closing, their funds to close that was estimated from the lender and what the final closing cost is going to be from the closing attorney. Okay. The title company and the lender uses certain numbers, and then they turn it over to the closing attorney, and there may be slight differences in tax prorations or a water bill that wasn't accounted for that needs to be included in that. So there can be slight differences between what was estimated by the lender and what is the final from the closing attorney. Okay. And has the buyer made the appropriate arrangements to have whatever funds are needed to close deposited to the closing attorney's office? And usually that is done via a wire transfer. And wire transfers, depending upon your bank, may be very quick, may take a long time. Just kind of depends. All right. And all of these things, these are all conversations that you're having with your client to make sure that they're familiar with what the process looks like. And then you say, what questions do you have? Okay. All right. Then there's some stuff that you're going to be doing within the back office here, and making sure that you're working with the help desks to make sure that they have all the documents on file. You can log into your Brokerment and verify that all tasks have been completed and documents have been submitted. And if the file is in compliance, this is where we all love Karen and what she does. And Karen will make sure that that we have all of the documents and all the tasks have been completed. And when that is the case, then she will issue what is called the CDA, the Commission Distribution Authorization, which is also known as, generically speaking, your pay at close. All right, that's your ticket to walk away from the closing desk with a check in your hand for your portion of your commission. And we all want that, right? So can we all agree this is really important? And when the help desk or Karen starts hounding you for an amendment that was mislabeled or an initial that was missing, ultimately, this is the reason why you want to respond quickly and efficiently, and don't look at that as a thorn in your side. This is someone and some part of the office that ultimately is going to put money in your pocket. So you want to make sure that you are addressing those issues quickly and efficiently. All right. And then the day prior to or the day of the closing, you're going to request a copy of the Alta from the closing attorney. If you have not already received it, verify that the commissions are correct and forward a copy of that to your client. Sometimes it's going directly from the closing attorney to them. Sometimes it's not. And it's up to you to brief them with that. And if Century 21 was the holder of the earnest money, verify that the earnest money has been sent to the closing attorney, because it is necessary for them to be able to complete the transaction. That's something that's typically happening in the background. If you were to forget that step, it probably would still be taking place in your, without you being the bird dog to it. But I put it in there just to make sure we're covering all the bases.
I have a quick question.
Okay. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so this might be a silly question because I've not gotten my license yet. So, so I had a closing on my house, and at the closing table on the house that I sold, the two realtors got checks.
Mhm.
Do those checks go? Are they their checks or their checks to the brokerage? Who did I guess.
It could be both. In some cases, it is both. Typically, that's what the pay at close document that I just referenced in the presentation. That's what that is. That is the instructions from the brokerage to the closing attorney to cut two separate checks, one for the brokerage and one for you. And that is based off of whatever your commission split is with your broker and any fees that are involved and things like that. So yes.
So I paid $44,000 to sell my house.
Mm-hmm.
So both of the salespeople got 3% or whatever that is, 6% or whatever that is. They got whatever they got. I just know it came out of what I was supposed to get back.
That is true.
Is the check cut to the salesperson or is it cut to the? I'm so confused.
It depends. It depends. It could be just one check that was going directly to the brokerage, and then the brokerage takes that money, figures out what your split is, and cuts you a separate check.
I see.
But that's what the pay at close is. It could be that they're issuing two checks, one to the brokerage, one to you as the individual agent. Got it. Every situation is going to be slightly different.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so we're not finished with the slides, and we can pick up from here and talk about the second part of this on Thursday. But I have occupied 30 minutes of your time. I hope you find it productive, and helpful. Any questions before we cut things off here? Okay.
Thanks so much.
All right. Everybody have a great week. I'm back. If you need me, I'm here. Call during normal business hours, after business hours. Call the broker hotline. All right. Love y'all. Talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you too, Jay.